would like to proceed now with a very special program for this afternoon, which is dedicated to a generational exchange on the role of space in the fight against climate change. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome on stage the IAF President, Clay MOWRY, for a welcome and the introduction. Clay, please.
Thank you very much, Christian. The IAF has spent several years now focusing on what we call 3G diversity, which is generation, geography, and gender. And it was actually put into place by one of my predecessors, Jean-Yves Le Gall, and then carried forward by Pascal Ehrenfreund, this 3G mantra that we have. And really a big focus of that is working on the generational aspect of it. And we're really proud on a number of levels to partner with the Space Generation Advisory Council, but also to foster programming within the IAF structure itself to bring this next generation forward, to focus on the workforce issues associated with next generation. So just a few programs to mention that we've undertaken. We do the IAF Emerging Space Leaders Grant Program, which each year funds 30 YPs and students to attend our International Astronautical Congress every year. And that program is more or less doubled in size in the last several years, and we're really proud. And we want to keep extending that because we know the cost of attending the Congress, of course, is high for students and young professionals. And so we're constantly looking at ways to extend that. We also have a Youth Recognition Program award for exceptional students and young professionals that contribute to the field of aeronautics, astronautics, and so we award those every year. We do a student enterprise competition for the best technical papers that are presented by students, and then we have the Luigi G. Napolitano Award presented annually to a young scientist who significantly contributed to the advancement of aerospace science and presented a paper at the International Astronautical Congress. So, here at the Gloc this year, it was the first time the IAF actually funded 12 students to come to Norway to attend this event. I've met several of them here in the hallways. They're super enthusiastic about being here and participating in the programming this week. So this is really a tremendous achievement to have them coming to one of our global conference series. The theme that we have here this week about climate change, it really ties in directly for the next generation because we're really talking about the future of planet Earth, right? And they're the ones that are going to inherit this. They're the ones that are going to be running the place. And so it's very important for us that they attended this event and that we can actually think about what their role will be kind of in the future. So we're excited about having a panel that I'm going to be moderating in a few minutes on next generation. So again, we'll be taking 3 older folks like myself with a little bit of gray hair with the next generation and actually having a generational exchange on a number of these topics and talking about how we move forward. So that's just to give you a bit of a summary. Now we can move into the award phase. And Christian, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, as you have mentioned already, we have this time set up also an Emerging Space Leader Grants program for the Gloc conference. And to tell us more about this and to recognize and call up on stage the winners of these awards, I'm happy to welcome on stage our Vice President, IAF Vice President for Education and Workforce Development, Davide PETRILLO. Please come up.
Good afternoon, everyone, and it's a really big pleasure for me to be here together with Clay, Christian, and all of you. And as you've seen now during these days, it has been an amazing Gloc so far. Lots of international discussions, high-level speakers, lots of discussions, recommendations, but something that when we started organizing the Gloc was something for me very important to say we also need the presence of the youth here. So that's what you're going to see really, really soon with this panel. But also, on top of that, discussing as well about the fact that there will be this discussion with the youth. The Federation didn't stop here, because the Federation also gave the opportunity to 12 students and younger professionals to be here with a grant, with a sponsorship, fully sponsored by the Federation. And that's the reason why we are here, giving recognition to these 12 outstanding students and young professionals that we have here together in front of us, that I would like to call everyone on stage and give them a recognition, of course, from our IAF president. And I'm going to call them all on stage one by one. So when I call your name, please come on stage. So the first one is Fahime Barzamini.
Congratulations.
Thank you. You can stay on stage on here. Then Gavin Chung. Saba El Shawa.
Give you two. Double.
Then Seamus Lombardo. Kumbirai Mantingo. Then Ellen Novianti. Congratulations. Alessandro Paravano. Satesh Raj Perisamei.
Like the jacket.
Prem Phillips. Then Abd Elamid Sheriev. Thank you so much. And Liu Topfer. Yes, that's the last. Unfortunately, we also have the 12 that is Querit Sara Cebilla that couldn't stay with us, but we also congratulate them all and also her for being here. So, sorry. Perfect. Thank you.
Congratulations. Yeah, congratulations. Thank you. Thank you.
I introduced them. Great. So please give them another round of applause because they really deserve it. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to move into the session that focuses on the youth, and it's a real big pleasure for me to introduce you to the next keynote speakers, Giulia Bordachini and Saba El Shawa from the Space Generation Advisory Council that are going to give you an overview on the SGAC report on the climate change. The floor is yours.
So, good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to represent the SGAC. I'm here with Giulia, my co-lead. Over the past year, we worked with a really passionate group of young professionals and students to develop the official policy position of the Space Generation Advisory Council. If you don't know, the SGAC is a rapidly growing NGO for students and young professionals between the age of 18 to 35. We have now over 25,000 members working on a variety of topics, and it's really a pleasure for us to be part of this great organization and to be here on their behalf today. So if we can, our mission basically for this group was to develop and advocate a united space policy position. So essentially what this means is, as I said, we have thousands of members, a lot of very high priorities and opinions and things to contribute to the space industry. But up till last year, we didn't have a policy position that represented all of us and our organization. And so we put together this amazing team under the Space Generation Advocacy and Policy Platform, led by Giulia and myself, but also including engineers, lawyers, educators, people from all backgrounds. And that's why we took this really interdisciplinary approach to create recommendations for climate action because we believe that interdisciplinarity is key in solving this problem.
So, as Sabas mentioned, I would say that the key factor of our working group was to be cross-sectoral. So we targeted three specific groups of stakeholders: scientific, community and academia, government and policymakers, and commercial industry, including the new space one. So what we found out is that the recommendations were a lot, I have to say. So we really invite you to have a look at the report to have a better understanding and a clear picture of what we carried out so far. So, but what we discovered is that the key factor in common between the three groups of stakeholders was that cross-contamination and stakeholder engagement is the key factor. But engaging stakeholders doesn't only mean like to onboard them in the space sector, but we really need to help them establish in the sector. So not only through fundings, but also through specific guidelines that could be binding and non-binding, I would say. But also, let's say, by disseminating the scientific effort of the academia. So government really should grasp on the key result of that community and should leverage on them. Because research valorization is actually what it leads to innovation. And without innovation, we know that it's a bit of a buzzword so far, but without innovation, we cannot go forward. And going forward, it means for the commercial industry, for sure, to bring forward all the massive effort that they are already undertaking, because I have to say that what I can see so far, and also during my ordinary job, is that new space actors are interacted with all of them. So from academia to policymakers to governments. And so I would say they should obviously continue, but they should also leverage on all the pre-issues inside that the adjacent market can provide them. We can see also from manufacturing and additive manufacturing, quantum technology, and we are often talking about artificial intelligence. So I would say that it's another key factor, putting together the three target stakeholders that we identified and that we provided recommendation to.
So as you can see, there were a variety of topics that we covered in this report, starting with the environmental impacts of space activities. So as you know, over the past day and a half at this conference, we've been talking a lot about the use of space technology, of Earth observation data to help with the climate crisis. But at the same time, we need to reflect on how the space industry also contributes environmental impacts. And part of this, if you look at the life cycle assessment of a space project, it's not just launching rockets into space. It's also the production. It's the resources that you need to build something, to test it, to deploy it. It's the space debris problem, which we still have a lot of work left to characterize how space debris and atmospheric demise actually impacts our environment. So some of our recommendations in the report relate to that. So the harmonization of all of these elements across different actors. But at the same time, through our research, we looked at how the space industry, being so tied with the defense industry, most of our impacts actually comes from military activities, the grand majority of our impacts. And so one of the recommendations is also looking at how we can decouple defense and space activities and reframe it in a way that the space industry is not directly contributing to negative social and environmental impacts. At the same time, this brings me to the education and outreach for climate action. So we rightly talk about educating people about the benefits of using space for climate and the benefits of space for life on Earth. But at the same time, we also need to educate ourselves in the space industry about different ways of learning, different knowledge systems. Some of the speakers yesterday mentioned indigenous people and how they can benefit from space. At the same time, we also need to look at how space negatively impacts them and what we can learn from their way of life to make sure that we don't carry these same ideologies that are causing the climate crisis up into space. And that obviously ties in with the ethical and political considerations because space is very geopolitically driven. we need to be conscious of the barriers that are imposed on certain countries, on individuals from even accessing these types of discussions. We saw yesterday one of the speakers unfortunately couldn't get a visa, and so they couldn't come here and share more about their story. So what can we in the space industry do to break down some of these barriers to make sure that people actually have the opportunity to bring their knowledge and their problems and help us develop solutions for them? And so with that, I think the reason I'm focusing more on the challenges is because we're all here because we love space and we see the value in space exploration. I think at the same time, having this kind of forum where so many different stakeholders and people from all types of the space communities are represented, it's really a great opportunity for us to reflect on what we can also do better and actually make sure that space is for all and space is for the benefit of humankind.
With regards to the space law and policy development, but also green economy, finance in new space, I would say the recommendation is as well another fil rouge. But the fil rouge always lead to the engagement of new actors and the advocating and disseminating effort that we're carrying out, and we really invite you to join us on that, and we really look forward to our intergenerational discussion. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia and Saba, for this really interesting keynote and giving us this insight. Now we need to reconfigure again a bit. We are getting ready for our first of two panels that will see an intergenerational discussion on, and that's the title of the first session, Are We Doing Well? Space Science and Technology for Climate Action. So this will really be a panel that will feature the next generation representatives and senior space professionals to engage into an interesting discussion. And in order to moderate this session, it is my distinct pleasure to call on stage the IAF Vice President for Science and Academic Relations, Professor Tanja Masson-Swan. Tanja, the floor is yours. Please.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much, Christian, and thank you to the previous speakers for setting the scene for this session on an intergenerational discussion about climate change and what space can do. Before we start, let me see. Who considers themselves as representatives of the senior group here? Who represents the junior group here? Kudos to you guys, because you are still here. And we would have liked to actually have that other group here present as well. So I'm sure that this is being recorded, and we will make sure that it is distributed so that they can also take note of the important messages that we are going to hopefully discuss. And to do that in this first panel, we have a great setup with several panelists who I will invite one by one to come here to just give you a few words about their background. First of all, Lev Töpfler, who is pursuing an interdisciplinary degree in space law and sustainability at Leuphana University in Lüneburg, Germany. She's a former participant in the Manfred Lach Space Law Moot Court competition and is the German UN Youth Delegate to the United Nations General Assembly and also member of the German delegation to COPUOS. Welcome, Lev. Then we have Agnieszka Lukaszczyk, if she can get out of the arms of her very young participants. Agnieszka, welcome. Agnieszka is Vice President for Government Affairs of Europe, the Middle East and Africa at Planet, who we have seen, of course, previously in the previous few days. But I don't know where you raised your hand, because you also are have been very instrumental in SGAC, in various other
Thank you for asking, because I had a very big internal dilemma.
Yeah, you had to raise both hands.
Because let's be honest, I'm probably now in in a senior category, which I refuse to acknowledge.
I think that was why you were invited to the panel, but no, I think you can definitely represent both groups also with your adorable son here. But so Agnieszka also worked previously in the European Commission, as well as was the Brussels Director for Secure World Foundation, and was one of the early key players in Space Generation Advisory Council. And she's also the lead for the first S in the SIS agenda of MOWRY on the sustainability part of the agenda, so we look forward to hearing your views. We then have Saba Al-Shava, who we have seen just previously. Where are you? There you are. But to just introduce her as well, Saba is an interdisciplinary researcher and engineer who is pursuing a PhD in sustainable development and climate change, so very relevant topic. And she's the founder of the Jordan Space Research Initiative, which aims to bridge sustainable development with space exploration and establish an analog research facility in Jordan. And of course, she's the co-lead of this wonderful SGAC report that we just heard about. Alison Leitner is from NASA. Very happy that you join us. Alison is the NASA Program Manager for Climate and Resilience Applications that works with public and private sector to determine how to utilize NASA's resources for climate-related decisions and analysis. In addition to that, she's senior advisor for the GLOBE program, which is an international science and education program focusing on primary and secondary education, and also the former program manager of the early career research. So very useful to have you, very happy to have you with us on the panel. Milica Milosev, she was also here and involved with the SGAC report. She is the founder of eConnects, which is an association strengthening the link between environment, space, and society. And she calls herself an environmentalist, and she has a degree in ecology and in biology professor. And she's a climate advocate, and also was involved with the SGAC report on climate action. Well, welcome, Milica.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Rune Floberghagen is a very full table. Rune is head of the Science, Applications and Climate Department of ESA and has a long career in the agency. He was previously mission management of ESA's scientific satellite fleet, as well as Earth Explorer research and development missions, and he led the implementation of the agency's climate programs. So we have a very competent and complete panel, and we will be spending the next little less than an hour to discuss various aspects of the topic of climate change and what space can do. I'm going to start with you, Lev, if you don't mind. Why is it for you important that we address space and climate and youth all together? And why is it important to involve youth from all these different backgrounds in the discussions around space and climate?
Yes, so first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here. The first point I would make is that all three topics have a lot in common. First, they are inherently international. You cannot address it alone, and we have to stick together to improve the lives of youth, to improve climate adaptation mitigation, and to improve the use of outer space. The second one is that they are gaining more importance. Each of these topics is more and more addressed in international frameworks and in international diplomacy. So if we address all of them together, we can really have an impact. And third, when we talk about impact, the impact on future generations of all these three topics is huge. The decisions we make now will impact us forever. And why I think it's most important to address youth, there's a very simple answer. It's power in numbers. We are the biggest young generation of all time. There are 1.8 billion people under 25 years old alive right now. So discounting them in discussions, either in space or in climate, would just be strategically unwise. And why I think it's important to address youth from all backgrounds is because when it comes to climate and space, it's important to localize solutions and to listen to the people and what they need. We talked about end users a lot in the yesterday and today, and about solutions, and the data is there, who can use it. And only if we address people from all backgrounds and from and all their problems, we can develop the ideas that are needed. And only if we reach everyone, we can stand unified in the actions we choose.
Yeah, that sounds very complete, and I really like your argument that not only you are the ones who are going to be most impacted by the climate crisis, but you can also have the biggest impact yourselves on trying to solve it. So I think we put our trust in the hands of that big youth generation to do so. Thank you for sharing that. Agnieszka, in your experience working with governments in the EMEA region, do you feel that governments are more aware nowadays and more open about what space technology can do and how they can learn from that, how it can help them meet their goals and their challenges?
I mean, I think they're definitely more open than they were 5-10 years ago, that's for sure. I think part of it is that we are in crisis, global crisis when it comes to environment, biodiversity loss, climate change. We're experiencing war in Europe, and obviously all those technologies play a role, and they are becoming more of an important tool. So I think there's more awareness, still not at the level probably where we would like to see it, but there's definitely more awareness and more open, I think, open mind to get exposed to these tools. At the same time, I feel like the government, everybody knows when governments are making decisions, there's a political agenda, whatever that agenda might be, and a lot of policymakers are not thinking long term. They're thinking of their election term.
Re-election.
Yeah. And that's not how you solve global problems that are going to affect future generations. So I think this is one thing, and then also I feel it's essential that if you want to solve global problems, you have to cooperate globally. And obviously that's a problem too for various reasons, trade issues, competition. And so everyone is kind of thinking in their own little corner. And not maybe, during the time of crisis, we should be building bridges, not walls. And I don't think we're quite there yet. So that's what I would like to encourage. And it's not just about working with governments, but I think the cooperation needs to be between governments, academia, civil society, industry, because we all are part of the problem and we are all part of the solution. So I do think that together we can really make a difference. Alone, it's difficult.
Yeah, thank you. And is it also useful to not only speak with governments, but also to speak perhaps with regional authorities or even local authorities?
For sure. I think it's also for several reasons. One is that often, you have different political groups in charge of different areas. So that where, you're not just talking to one, but you're talking to different ones. And local governments and regional governments are more focused on the precise solution that they need, instead of just like a general overview. So absolutely, I think we're doing that at Planet a lot, and I'm sure others are as well, but everybody plays a role.
Yeah, thank you. Saba, over to you. This part of the panel is about what are we doing well. But of course, there are also things that we're doing perhaps not so well. Could you tell us a little bit about what your view is about what we're not doing so well, what you perhaps came across in your work in building the report and focusing on ethical considerations, outreach, and so on, and also perhaps bring into that your experience into the Jordan initiative that you launched and perhaps your PhD research?
Yes, thank you, Tanya. So, as I was saying in the speech earlier, I think there's a lot of great things that we're doing in the space industry, and I do think we are doing well, but there is a lot of room to do better. And this initially also started when I was reflecting on, how hard it is for me to get into the space industry as a Jordanian, as someone who comes from a country who does not have a space industry. it took me over 10 years to actually get a job in the space industry. And to be honest, once I did, I found that there were a lot of problems with how we were applying the technology that we have in terms of, as a Palestinian, I have certain moral conundrums in how the technology is being used, the lack of sustainability in the way that we approach the projects. And so when it came to Jordan specifically, my goal and what I focused on during my master's at the International Space University is how we can bridge sustainable development with space exploration, specifically focusing on Jordan's national priorities. So for people in Jordan who are living in refugee camps, who are suffering because they don't have water, they don't have food, they don't have energy, to just come in and tell them you should invest in space, of course they think that's ridiculous. Like, that is just not even on their radar. But the reason we started looking at analog research specifically is because, in a way, it's not just about climate mitigation through Earth observation data. We also have spin-off technologies that can help with climate adaptation. So that for people who are already facing these impacts, we can't just tell them, you know, there are some satellites up there, they're beaming down some data, it's going to help make everything better. We need to actively work on solutions through the technologies that we have. At the same time, being an engineer, of course, I love science, I love technology, but I think we have this tendency to really focus on technocratic solutions, that technology is going to save us, and that's not the case. You really, if you want to have systemic change, which is the core of the problem, in my opinion, you need to look at all different sides of the problem. And that's why for my PhD, I've done a complete kind of shift in my approach. So going from robotics and engineering to now working on psychology and outreach. So if you haven't heard of the overview effect, it's this magical phenomenon where astronauts see the Earth from space and somehow changes their psychology, their mentality. They become pro-social, pro-environmental. And that got me thinking, well, you know, a handful of people are going to experience this in their entire lives. How can we bring this down to earth? How can we get more people to see this experience and actually validate what's happening? Like, does it actually cause this psychological shift? And so that's why for my PhD, I'm working on how we can use virtual reality to simulate this experience and validate whether it can actually motivate people to act in sustainable ways. So by looking at all these different sides and incorporating different knowledge systems, I mentioned earlier, you know, indigenous perspectives. I think it's also important to note that for a lot of space infrastructure that gets built on indigenous people's lands, we are not even discussing with them, involving them in any way. And so in Jordan, what we're doing is actually working with the Bedouins who live in the desert where we want to build the analog facility, not just to involve them, but also to learn from them, because they have ways of living in the environment that we can really learn from in order to shift this, what I call the ideological problem of exploration. So doing it in a sustainable way from all angles.
So here as well, you see the effect going both ways, actually, because the analog can perhaps teach certain lessons for managing refugee camps, and on the other hand, as you say, you can learn from the people who live in the desert, things that can be useful in the analog mission itself, right? And when you do these virtual reality sessions, is that then to emulate the overview effect, so that people experience what it is to be in space, so that they can see that fragility of Earth without borders and so on?
Yeah, exactly. So actually, for my PhD, I'm working with a company called Earthscape VR that already develops these VR simulations. And they actually use them for mental health and kind of workshops for leadership and so on. But what I did just last week, I was in an analog mission where we showed this VR simulation to the analog astronauts. So people who have been in isolation for 4 or 5 days. Does that impact the way that they think differently than it would if I were to show it to someone, at school or in a university lab? But the idea is that by validating the way that this awareness that it raises, then that would motivate people to act and think in more sustainable ways, because that's eventually what's going to cause the change that we need.
But does that mean that we all should go through such a virtual reality session?
I think so. I think it should be part of every school curriculum. Maybe not necessarily the specific VR simulation. but I think the narrative behind it as well.
Yeah.
Again, this goes back to indigenous perspectives. I think you don't need to see the Earth from space to realize that we're all connected and that we need to take care of the environment.
Yeah.
There's, groups and communities that have been teaching this for thousands of years.
Sure.
But I think seeing the Earth from space is a very strong visual tool to portray these same ideas. So again, it all comes together in a way.
Yeah, I'm saying yes, but of course I haven't been to space, but I can imagine that. And I don't want to go either. I will stay down here on Earth and do the law. But yeah, that's very interesting. By the way, if anyone wants to interject, please, of course, go ahead. And also, we have the Slido activated, so please enter your questions, and we'll get to that at the end of some questions that I will ask. Alison, over to you. From your experience that you gained in your various roles that I mentioned earlier, what unique perspectives do youth bring to the table in advancing the use of space science and technology to address climate change, action and crisis? What is your experience?
So first off, thank you for having me, and thank you also for having this kind of session at a conference like this. It's great to hear from this diversity of voices. I will say that Sabha basically is the example that I would show you for what is the unique perspective that people can bring. In the work that I've done with early career researchers, which in our language tends to focus on people in graduate school and shortly thereafter, I think that a lot of times people stress on their passion and the fresh ideas, and I think that's incredibly important. But another aspect that I think is perhaps even more important is this multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary thinking, and the idea of the training that they've had in a diversity of things, quite literally the person I'm sharing the table with in engineering and psychology. And it's that connection between different disciplines and the perspectives that you bring. It's not even just interdisciplinary work, it's really across everything. And this unique perspective, I think, is something that early career people have more often than those who are more senior in their career, where they've taken, they have a PhD in biology or physics or engineering. And just hearing about this diversity of perspectives, I've seen so many early career researchers who are in graduate school and they're doing a summer internship at a tech company or at a space company. I've had early career researchers who are in an academic type of institution, they move to an NGO, they move to a for-profit company. And I think that that happens far more often now than it used to. And I think all of those different perspectives are key to building a better sense of not only what are the challenges, but why are they the challenges, and what are the solutions, but even perhaps more importantly, how can we implement these solutions? How can we bring various people on board with these kinds of solutions to really enable the success that we're looking for in terms of understanding this climate crisis and doing something about it? And so I really, I'm just so pleased to be here on the stage with all of the people who are really representing this and embodying this themselves. And I think that's really the key contribution that people earlier in their career, young professionals in your language, are really able to help bring to address those challenges and also the solutions.
Yeah, it's true that before, in our parents' time or even our time, you would study law or medicine or economics or engineering. And nowadays, not only you have a much wider variety of kinds of studies. I mean, you have the choice between, I think in the Netherlands, it's like 3,000 different kinds of studies, which indeed are also interdisciplinary. But also, in the past, people used to work in one company and stay there for the rest of their life. I mean, how many people have not spent their whole life at ISA or at Shell or whatever? And nowadays, it's also much more accepted to, as you say, go into public and private or NGO and do different things, which will really cross-fertilize and enrich, I think, a person's perspective and experience. So, yeah, very true. Milica, over to you. Where are you? Could you share a few short thoughts about how emerging spacefaring countries, perhaps like your own country, Serbia, is benefiting from space science and technology for climate change? And in that perspective, what is working well or not?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here and being part of the panel. And thank you for the question. I think it's very important that we bring up the developing countries up to this discussion. Why is that? So I would like to say that first to start with a word challenge. We have, like in my country, in Serbia, in my home country, we have challenge with because we don't have space agency, we don't have space program or space education or curricula, so nothing space related, unfortunately. And also there is issue, so we are at the conference talking about climate crisis and environmental issues, and in Serbia they are not recognized yet as on the level as they should. So combining those two with no space agency, space program, and lack of understanding for the climate crisis and in general environmental issues with all the pollutions and biodiversity laws in Serbia, it's really, really hard to work. There are a couple of organizations and mostly in institutions as a part of university who are actually working on using space data, but mostly for agricultural purposes. So that is like the only thing that we are doing so far. There are also several initiatives that are trying to implement and bring space to Serbia. My organization is one of those as well. So it's a challenging, so for the question, what we do good and what we do bad. Unfortunately, more is with the bad because we are not doing much. But I'm really positive that will change soon because, as we know, climate issues and environmental issues have no borders. So we are all affected. And as we heard so much during the yesterday and today, space technology is one of the crucial tools to help us not to find solutions, but also to adapt on these changes that we are facing, because we have to adapt since everything related to climate and environmental changes happen very fast. So yes, I think that the case, also I can agree with a lot of what Saba said so far for her country, for Jordan. It's kind of the same, since we are in the same group of non-space countries. So I really hope that will change and that we will do something more about it. And I also have to agree with Agnieszka about the government's issues. So one of the key things is that governments of the countries recognize the problem, and also to recognize space as one of the tools to help us overcome that problem.
And would it, in that sense, then help to have an agency and a program to be able to then make use of space more? Do you think that would be a good tool for the country to have to make things better?
I think, but first, what my personal opinion is, I'm also a teacher, so I think one of the first things will be to educate, and through space curricula, and also to educate about environment and to link environment with space. So I would say that the first thing first would be to set up a program, space program, in a sense of education and outreach, and after that, slowly, of course, that space agency would. I mean, if my opinion is that every country should have space agency. Mm-hmm. So we are unfortunately not. We're far from that, but that is something that should change. So we'll see.
And probably Jordan also doesn't have a space agency. I'm not very aware, but
not yet.
Not yet.
Basically, our organization basically acts as a space agency. Yeah. Like, people approach us, they're like, we couldn't find a Jordanian space agency. We're trying to create partnerships with your government. We only found you. I'm like, well, I'm happy to facilitate this, but I can't even get to the government right now. So, you know, they have other priorities. That's why taking that angle of, you know, the national priorities, the sustainable development goals, it's a really important step to try and bridge this mentality.
Yeah, and Agnieszka and Lev, you both have ties to Poland. I mean, Poland has had an agency and a program and is working on a law, I believe.
Yeah.
Do you confirm that that is indeed a way to become an actor, to just start by having an agency and a program and be active in the field?
I'm not sure if you agree, but not necessary. So, I mean, I think it's very good to have an agency. Obviously, it puts the country on the next level, especially when it comes to international cooperation and having things centralized. But I think the first thing, especially now, is for the country, for the government to use space technology. And you don't need agency for that from the start. So what I mean by using space technology, having the Ministry of Environment or Ministry of Agriculture, use space tools, space services, space data, space applications for farmers, for sustainable agriculture, for forestry, for, and you don't need agency for that. So I know that, for instance, a lot of our clients, our customers are usually government entities, not space agencies, because space agencies usually do not have big budgets, except in few countries, which I'm not going to name. But they are more there to do research and to do, market uptake, which is of course important. But like when we look, for instance, in countries in Southeast Asia or Africa or Latin America, you cannot expect, 37 countries in Africa all have space agency. But you should expect them to use space data to deal with their natural disasters, droughts, hunger, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's the first thing. And the agency, then if you feel like you have the funds and you have the means, it's a natural step, not necessarily first step.
And there can be an intermediate step also, of course, having an office instead of an agency or something like that. I mean, it does perhaps help to have a focal point.
For sure.
But of course, in Europe, we're very fortunate to have a big agency, namely ESA, so that brings me naturally to Rune.
With a budget.
Budget. How about ESA and other agencies that we have seen, of course, during the past few days? Are they good at engaging ideas and contributions from young and younger or younger enthusiasts on climate scene? And what are major agencies like ESA doing to inspire young professionals? And is it any different in the space sector than in, for instance, another technology sector, to your view?
Yes, so thank you very much for this question. It's been very interesting to listen to my young, or at least younger professionals, to hear their very insightful comments about what is happening. I must say that you have been very polite also, because in my opinion, actually this meeting that is happening here could arguably be said to be the most important meeting at this conference. And that's not because myself or anybody else from a major space agency is presenting or talking here, but it's because this will be a platform for actually speaking directly to not just me and Alison, but the whole range of, let's say, senior leaders that we see here, and they're actually in great numbers here at this conference. So I'll come to that in a bit later in my intervention here. But I guess my feeling is, to use actually the words of Minister Bad-Eide, who spoke here yesterday, who was, I think, touching us with first of all, honest, but also kind of passionate words, where he said, when he was asked, are politicians doing good? And he was asked basically the same question, and he said, we are not good, but we are getting better. And I think for the space agencies, we are seeing something similar, because we are also representatives of the space sector, and we are governed by the same ministries, obviously. So, to give some examples of what is happening, for example, in the agency where I work, we have created new categories of professionals, for example, that can come and work for our agency. It's a junior professional program that allows for people to come and work with us and gain important experience working directly with the program managers, working directly with the scientists, working directly with the people who run projects together with the community, and getting, let's say, into this world. That doesn't mean they stay with us forever. They can come for a while and understanding how this world works, and then go back in other parts of the world. We support mobility as well, and then we see later how it goes, whether they choose to continue in an academic career, in an NGO type of career, in a political career, or in an agency type of career. And these are things that we have recognized that are important to feed into this ecosystem. And it starts also before that with training opportunities. Yeah? So we have training programs both for, let's say, people who have just graduated and also for postgraduates. And they are growing in number because we realize that we at the Space Agency, if we are going to be able to continue to be good project managers, good program managers, we cannot just rely on the experience that we made maybe decades ago, right? Well, when we were ourselves active researchers. So this interaction is gradually taking a stronger position within the execution of space programs. And that's actually a pretty good experience. And for that, we have created, let's say, things like a science hub that's as a place where people can come and work with us. We do not necessarily pay you, but at least we offer you the possibility to come and stay with you for more or less as long as you want, to be there and learn from the experience and talk directly with the people who are driving the programs. And that is for science, that is also for transformational innovation, how the way we bring in new technologies like machine learning, artificial intelligence, all kinds of new developments that are happening, let's say, in the perimeter of Earth observation or climate discussion. We also have started recently with something that we call open calls. So these are calls that provide funding to the community without necessarily having to fit a particular programmatic framework. It means that we are open to ideas that come, let's say, out of the blue or come, let's say, from people who do not necessarily have followed the traditional path of entering into the space program. And it is actually, I'm happy to say this is the most successful program that we have in terms of number of proposals that we get from the community. So this is, I think it's getting better. This is, I'm not trying to sort of defend myself and rest on our laurels, let's just speaking like that. It's a fact that this is growing and the opportunities are there. So we have done something more to build on this, which is when we look at the strategies, the scientific strategy, the climatic strategy that we would like to follow for the future, we have actually given 2 areas of this in the hands of the youngsters. The first one is the open innovation aspect of it, the way that you do things in an open and inclusive way. I think this is something I can let's say, without hesitation say that this is driven 100% by the younger colleagues at the European Space Agency. And they grabbed this opportunity and very happy to be that and to be doing that. And it is also, in our experience, the best solution because they have a different way of working together than the old school professors that we all knew from back when we were studying. Yeah? So there is a generational change there and it is working there very well. The second area where younger colleagues are really driving the development of the Space Agency and the Space Agency's business is in the area of digital innovation, obviously. Yeah? Anyone above the age of 40, I think, is kind of outdated in this business. And with the way we try to sort of make sure that the solutions that we plan, the solutions that are needed, not just today, but also a few years from now, we need to have this driven by the right people from the start. And so these 2 areas of the scientific and exploitation strategy of the agency are actually driven by youngsters. And this is working very well, and we have only good experience with this. Now, is this any better or worse than in other sectors? Well, obviously there is fight for talent. Yeah? I mean, everybody knows that the IT sector is in dire need for talent as well, and they pay well, yeah. And this is a fact. Said that, the type of people that we attract usually have, let's say, the right passion for the thing that we are working on. They have usually also a combination of an interest in Earth observation or climate science, as well as in IT, and these are the right people for pushing this thing further. So, yes, there is competition. Maybe we do not necessarily offer the highest salaries, but we offer good jobs, we offer meaningful jobs, and we offer also the possibility for younger people to be part of the decision-making process and part of the definition of the future programs. And that's what I would have liked also to hear from more people here, to say that this is actually the way to go. You're actually a bit too modest, in my opinion. But, so, coming back to where I started, we are not great, but doing better, I think. And I'll come back to what we should do more when I have a chance to speak a little bit later on.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure we'll come back to that. So it's interesting, you're saying all these programs that exist, the young graduate traineeships and these junior professional programs and so on, they serve on the one hand, or they are executed on the one hand by having seniors taking juniors by the hand and teaching them the ropes of the game, but also actually it's important to give them the lead and to actually let them be the decision makers. I think that is something that's indeed important.
So it's about finding the middle way between taking them by the hand and throwing them just into deep waters. I mean, we find a middle way, right? And we don't have, let's say, necessarily the crystal ball on all of this, but by working together, actually, we have only good experience with this.
Yeah, great. Does NASA have similar programs, Alison?
Yes, and I think in a couple of different dimensions. So we have programs that are focused on early career researchers, which are opportunities for people in graduate school and shortly thereafter to propose, and their competition pool is each other versus competing with more senior career researchers. So I think that that's an opportunity. Within our NASA centers and facilities, we also have internships, various fellowship kinds of programs that bring people in and help support them and mentor them. I think that mentorship is probably always going to be an area where everyone is going to need some improvement in, and NASA is no exception to that. You know, I started as a very clearly early career research person. Now I'm sort of in perhaps a middle career research, a middle career person. I wouldn't say I'm a researcher anymore. And so I think that mentorship happens at all stages, and you learn from people who are earlier in their career, later in their career, and sort of thinking about those diverse perspectives. And I'll also put in a pitch for one more aspect where we often associate early career research with people who are younger. And that is often true, but it's not always true. And one of the things that we look to do is support transitioning career professionals. And so that's actually why our programs are based on sort of years since your terminal degree versus your specific age. And I think that that has been a nice way to support people who used to be teachers and now want to move into a research field. And so that's sort of increasing our diversity of perspectives and opportunities to do that through that lens.
Yeah, I definitely agree that you can indeed learn from each other, and I want to make mention of the IAF mentorship program as well, actually here to give a pitch for that, because that is also, I think, a wonderful tool, and I've had the privilege of mentoring someone last year and now again, and indeed, I also learned from them, and that is, I think, a very fruitful...
if I may add to that, I think that both programs are tremendous, and I'm really glad we're having this conversation, but I think it's really important that when we speak about space and youth, to not only focus on youth in space or in the space career or space sector, but at all young people who can benefit from space tools and what they do, especially when it comes to climate, when we look at this conference. But I speak to a lot of young people as part of my youth delegate position, and when I say space and sustainability, the first thing is the big question mark, how those things go together. And then why it's important. Something I like to do is ask them, oh, what do your parents do, or what do you do? And then when they tell me, I go, okay, so here's how this relates to space. Here is where space technology is relevant, and what you do, what your parents do, what you do at your school, what you're interested in. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. We can't just talk about youth in the space sector, but space as a tool, you use the word, I like the word, the space tools have to be available to everyone, and that's something we need to focus on if we want to go forward and do well in the planetary crisis.
And it's also what Rune mentioned, I think, with your open source program. Do you also see ideas coming there from non-space people about climate change, for instance?
We do, yeah. So we see an opening up. I mean, the space agencies today are definitely going beyond the core business of the space agencies of just a few years ago. So it's all about supporting the uptake of climate or Earth observation data in services, applications, in the broadest sense possible. And it's exactly what you say. It's global. It's not only for youth, it's for everyone, yeah. And we are trying to somehow do what we can to prepare society, help society dealing with this information, not just data, but real information that is actionable or useful for policy, but also for citizens at all levels to be part of the, let's say, the general debate in society about what needs to be done to manage our planet, as you say. So this is a challenge also for the space agencies, by the way, because we don't have all of these expertise in our house. So we need to reach out to new partners, new stakeholders, and to make sure that we set up the various activities and let's say, beyond space type of programs for the right reasons and so on. And we are learning how to do that as well. I mean, this is, there is money, there is funding, and maybe even more funding than for space activities in doing so, if we are to do it right. I mean, the green transition, for example, is something that will require investment at the level of trillions for the society. Okay, there's much more than what's going into any single space program. But for us to come there with a technological push to drive all of this will not work. It has to be driven from the solutions, what we do for society. And this is a new type of business that the space agencies are in.
Can I add on to...
Absolutely.
So what you were both saying about kind of the accessibility from a educational and professional background, and I think, NASA and ESA are amazing, but I wouldn't have been able to work at ESA if I wasn't Canadian. And I think, similarly for NASA, most programs, if you don't have a US citizenship, you can't get access to them. And this is a huge problem because also, as you said, you need the expertise in these countries. There are people in other countries who are already passionate about space or want to get into it. We don't have a space agency, they don't have a space agency. So to me, it seems very obvious, the solution, right? But again, this goes back to the restrictions on the space industry because it's space and defense. This idea of dual use and security restrictions, that's also why I keep repeating, this thing of decoupling defense and space, which people in the space industry think I'm crazy when I say this, but it's really about reframing the way that we structure our organizations. No one is saying stop working with the military, period, but think about how to separate science and exploration from these activities, to actually let people who can contribute get access to these programs as well.
Yeah, indeed. Good point. I want to stay with you and ask you a question. The following, Clay referred to the 3G program or the drive that is always important to have differences in geography. I think we're doing quite well. We have a quite diverse panel in generation. That was the whole setup of this panel. But what about gender? And I think this is the first panel where we have only Rune as representative of the male category.
My best.
Very brave. Now you know how we sometimes feel. But Saba, when I discussed with you, you mentioned that the Space for Climate group was majority female, and also your Jordan Space Research Initiative is all female, I believe, in working in climate change. And that made me wonder, are women more concerned or inclined to talk about climate change?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I don't like saying any specific gender is more inherently likely to do something, but at the same time, from my personal experience, so the application for the Jordan Space Research Initiative was open to everyone. The SGAC application was open to everyone. Most of the people who applied were female. Most of the people who got selected were female also because they seemed to put in more effort into their applications. I think that goes back to also a lot of women in the space industry, with imposter syndrome and thinking, I'm not going to get this job, I shouldn't even apply, or if you apply, you kind of go the extra mile. So I think that might have something to do with it. And then also, if you think about climate change and the climate crisis, it's not, it doesn't exist in a bubble. There's already inequalities that women face that only get magnified because of the climate crisis. Mm-hmm. And I think because of that, they may be more likely to pay attention to it because they already have these systemic barriers that they're facing, and they see that climate change is making them worse, and not just for themselves, but also for their communities. And I found, especially with my work in Jordan, so my team is all women, and only 2 of us have a space background, actually. The other women want to just bring new opportunities to their communities, to their countries, and especially looking at it through the lens of sustainable development. And I also wanted to share one of my favorite quotes from Queen Rania of Jordan, actually, who said that if you empower a woman, you empower a whole society. Because women tend to take what they learn and bring it back to their communities. So when I look at the climate community, our SGAC group, the Jordan Initiative, I also see this very clearly in terms of how the composition of the group ends up being somehow.
Interesting, interesting. And Agnieszka, did your perspective on this topic change after becoming a mother recently? How do you share something about that?
Absolutely, and thank you for asking that, because I was actually just thinking about it, looking at this little guy over there.
Exactly.
Who is my son. And it totally changes, because all of a sudden, and I think, and this is, I'm also like you, I don't want to generalize and saying, women are more likely to do this, no. But at the same time, it's true. On some things, like there is this maternal instinct. For instance, when you have a child, and I have his entire future planned out, right? Even though he's probably going to do something completely different in my head, and I think about his future a lot, and I worry about it, and I'm like, this is like I want him to have a good life and clean air and clean water, etc. And I'm not sure if. Sorry to put you on the spot, but my partner thinks about that too. Not because he doesn't care, but it's just not this is not how he's wired, right? Yeah. He's focusing on the present. Well, women we worry, right? And I worry, and so it definitely changes something. And as you said, we're more about thinking about the community, the family, the hen, that is trying to
matriarchal.
Yes, and of course you cannot. Again, not every
you can't generalize. No,
yeah, but there is something to it. So I definitely buy into that argument. And also we've noticed today, which was very funny. So there's 7 of us from Planet at this conference, and we've realized that it's our CEO, Will Marshall, and 6 women. and it's uncommon. Pretty it's incidental. Yeah. It's not like we are making a statement here, but it's actually a very cool incident to be, you have these female professionals who are here, and it's fine, and he's a minority, and it's great that he knows what it's like.
Yeah, holding strong. Melissa, we haven't heard from you in a while. I want to turn to you again. You are a former winner of the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs Space for Youth program. And I wanted to ask you how you feel that the UN is doing. Are they doing enough in making sure that youth is involved in climate action, and what space can contribute to that? Can you share about that, please?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's interesting, and it's connected with what we were discussing about what ESA is doing and NASA and also UN. So yes, as you mentioned, I'm a former Space for Youth winner. And it's interesting because that was in 2019, and that year topic was how space technology can contribute to achieving SDGs. And I chose to write an idea about, obviously, climate action. And back then, I attended my first IAC, and when I was talking about environment and climate change and space, people were a little bit of skeptic, like not so into that. But here we are 4 years later, having conference about that. Mm-hmm. So that's a good progress. So we're, I think, on a good way. Mm-hmm. But back to the question, what with the UN and their support for youth, to not be so polite, I must say, yes, that I didn't have after that not much connection with UNOSA, and which is, I think, very. Maybe I can say sad.
A loss for them, no?
Yes, because there was an idea. They're continue working with having the same competition, but I don't see after the competition. I don't see that it's anything else like happening, and that is a loss. So I think it would be very good if UN and the rest of the agencies and the, let's say, big players involve more youth. We heard some great initiatives that they have, programs, but again, Sava mentioned that if she is not also Canadian, she won't be able to participate and work for ESA. And for me, it's also the case because Serbia is not a state member, and for most of the applications or open calls, I cannot apply. Yeah. And again, there is a loss of really good potential, of expertise, of ideas, of overall, like positive energy and that energy to change something and do something good for the planet, for the environment, for space in general, and Earth and our mankind. So I think that we should more. Now I'm slowly going out of the youth part, but I think that we should definitely get youth more involved, as you mentioned, and also to be part of decision-making processes, because this planet and everything that we are doing will stay to them at the end. And so, yeah.
No, it's important, and I've heard several of you say, having the right passport can open doors, or having the wrong passport can keep a lot of doors closed, unfortunately.
Can I just add to that, because I think this is a very valid discussion, an important one. And I think industry can really play a role there as well, in a sense that the space world doesn't just end at agencies, and which for obvious reasons, if it's taxpayers' money, why should taxpayers pay for somebody else's salary? I understand the logic, but the industry, for instance, is there and looking for talent all the time. I know some companies, you've also mentioned it would be ideal if the decoupling of defense and space would happen, because there are security issues. Some companies will also not hire. However, there are more, especially when you look at new space companies that are, Planet being one of them, that are mission-driven. We, for instance, hire regardless of your passport, but a really talent focus. So if we think you're really good and there's a fit for whatever job, we're going to make it work. And I think there are more companies like that, but we also are not defense focused. Obviously, every company, it's dual use, and obviously there is, but we're, our data is all unclassified, et cetera. So, but there are other companies like that too. Don't give up.
No, for sure. I want. That's why I'm here. That's why I decided to stay in space industry and do something, and started my own organization. First of all, to educate youth in students in my home country that there's tons of possibilities. They just need to keep looking and to a little bit guide them how they can find the possibilities. But also I want to say thank you for having your planet open for everybody, as Serbia is also not in the European Union. And also that is an issue, because sometimes we cannot find work and actually get accepted for work because of the passport and because of the legal issues and stuff. So that's politics. But I'm very happy and glad to hear that there are companies.
Because if the company, wants somebody, they can apply for your visa, and
it's easier, of course. But
if I may, we are drifting into politics here. But obviously, let's say I listen to this kind of concern, and we realize that. Having a European member state passport is not the prerequisite for entering the gate of an ESA site. Okay? So you can come and work with us, let's say unpaid, and to understand how the program works, while the agency as such works with your home countries, at least the ones that are close to within the European borders somehow, and still not a member state of the European Space Agency, to see how we can actually integrate. And there are programs like a program of European cooperating states and so on that will allow for these things once that the process has been started at political level. And before that happens, you're more than welcome. You can use me and what I'm saying here on stage today to say you'd like to visit and see how we work. In terms of exploitation, science, we are all open. The shop is open. Yeah.
Thank you.
Noted. Excellent.
I'll also add that science is a collaborative process, and I tend to think a little bit more in the science and application space as opposed to the technology space. And yes, there are limitations in various places about citizenship and residency status, but we do have a variety of people who work at NASA from a variety of backgrounds. But furthermore, I always remind researchers in the US that you can work with NASA without working at NASA. And we have researchers at universities, but the same is also true internationally, that there's opportunities for collaboration. I don't want to ignore the fact that that does require funding. You can't always expect people to work without some kind of resource base. But there are still opportunities for collaboration, and that's where things can start and opportunities can open up. So I do appreciate that there are limitations, and I don't want to belittle them. But I also want to say that people can think about these collaborative opportunities. For example, I mentioned it in another session I was in about a program called Surveyor, which is a collaboration between NASA and the US Agency for International Development, where there's hubs around the world that are regionally based, that are focused on people and employ people from those countries, and so those are opportunities as well. Again, it's sort of, you don't have to work at NASA to work with NASA, and I suspect the same is true for my colleagues at other space agencies as well.
Yeah, interesting. And from your experience in the various roles that you have, what are the education and training and skills that we need to focus on for youth, that they are equipped to address these climate change challenges?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So another role that I have is managing, until recently, was managing a program called GLOBE, which is an international science and education program. And I think what's really valuable about that program, and is valuable for anyone, frankly, of any age, but this is particularly targeted for primary and secondary students, is thinking like a scientist, understanding how to critically analyze information, how to ask questions, how to think about how would you design a study or an experiment to answer that question. Those are incredibly important skills for understanding climate change and acting, but it's useful for just about everything in the world. And I think that thinking through that scientific mindset is a critical skill that we can use in every field, and really there is no harm in being able to analyze information and being able to act on it. And so I think that skills that focus on that will enable people to enter into a space sector, will enable people to enter into sectors that think about climate change and solutions to climate change. And also a variety of other benefits as well. So it's one of those cases where we can't really lose by enabling students to think like a scientist and to kind of take those critical thinking approaches.
And of course, we're super happy with everything that SGAC is doing, but you have to be 18 to join that. And so I think I hear you say we should also focus on school children, secondary, primary.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
This is why I brought my 14-month-old to a space conference.
Yes,
to prepare
what is it?
But he's not very interested.
Yeah. He's very brave. He's very good.
If I could maybe
yes, go ahead,
add on to that. I think it's important when we have these discussions to not only think about the opportunities on an individual level, but I mean, given my background, it's hard for me to not be polite, but I will try. But I think we have to recognize the urgency and the urgency of fighting climate change. We are looking into a catastrophic future, an existential threat through a triple planetary crisis. We cannot afford to exclude anyone who could help us. If it's youth or people from the global south, any barriers we build do not only disadvantage those people, but they disadvantage the global fight against climate change. I just want to make that very clear, and I think that's something to keep in mind. It's not just about individual politics, as you said, it's about survival at this point.
Yeah, that makes me silent. Jessica, thank you.
But exactly what you said, and I think this is what you just said, I think presented why the voice of youth is so important.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to hear people say that at a higher level because of the politics and because of the constraints and individual agendas, etc. But the youth is looking at things globally because you are thinking about your future. And you don't care about politics because you just want to have a change and you want to have an impact. And so this is why it's so crucial to hear those voices like yours constantly at events, in press, because we need to be reminded all the time, why do we do what we're doing? And this is where you come in. You're like almost like our conscience. And I really applaud you for it, that you have the guts to do it. And this is where youth is so phenomenal, because they can. They do it because they can and because they care, and nobody pays them for it. They do it because they genuinely care. And so I want to give you...
Go for it. And that actually ties in quite nicely, because I see the time is going very fast, and I want to look a little bit at the questions we have here, and there's one that got the most votes, and which is what seems to be the biggest difference in mentality towards climate change between young and old generation, and I think we're sort of touching on that in this previous discussion. But does anyone else see differences in approach, or what
Yeah, I would like to add, to get back to this and involvement of youth. I think that from my personal experience as working as a climate activist and a lot of workshops and working with them in school, the younger we get them involved, the better. And they are actually the one who will teach older generation about the climate change and why is it important to act now. Because we are talking here like the older generation, and we are just talking and not actually doing anything, but they will, let's say, force us to actually do something. Because when child of, I don't know, like 10 years comes to you and tell you, why are you taking this plastic bag, use this bag, you will do it.
Yeah,
you're going to feel stupid. And you're
exactly, exactly.
And
they are smarter than some of the things that we are.
Yes, Rune.
Yes, I would like to say something here. There is another striking difference, I think, which is that the young people who have come here, they have actually sat down in all of the sessions, listening to the senior people,
and
understanding what is happening. Whereas what is happening right now is not exactly the reciprocal of that.
Yep.
Okay. So, because what is happening right now, any senior official in this room, kudos that you're here. Great. But for those who are not here, they are using this opportunity for other types of meetings, because this is also a networking event. So, and on top of that, I'd like to say that in the organization of the program committee for this meeting, I looked before coming here on stage this afternoon, and I'm not sure I'm able to find a single person below the age of 40, or at least not below 30. Okay. I don't know everybody. I hope I don't offend anyone, but this is the reality. So what I would propose, or at least for this organization to consider, that next time we organize a Gloc, that one day is organized by the younger generation. Or at least there is sufficient representation of the younger generation on the program committee to derive and define exactly what should be done. And then we will see whether the situation is what we are facing here right this afternoon, where the seniors are somewhere else having networking meetings, which is about business, or not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is a super important message, Rune. Thank you. And I think we can actually use that remark as our conclusion for the next panel. What should be done better? Here you go. One
Make
very pragmatic point. So thank you so much. 2 seconds over time. We did well. Thank you very much for all your insights. I really enjoyed the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Tanya, for moderating this session. And of course, also to all our speakers, please, if you come forward for a group picture. I just need to add to your comment, of course, this panel was organized by our next generation, by SGAC and our committees, which also doesn't help to attract the senior people, as you see. I think we need to look in that direction, please. Good. Shall I help you? Thank you. So we'll just wait for the group picture to be taken to move forward into our next panel, which again was organized by the next generation. while the first panel was looking into whether we are doing well, I must say, after listening to this panel, I think we are not doing too bad, I would say, but we all agree that we can always do better. So, Clay, now it is up to you as the moderator of the next panel that is titled, Can We Do Better? An Intergenerational Pact for Space and Climate Action. Clay, please.
Well, I hope everyone, oh, just lost my microphone, sorry. I hope everyone's not too tired. We're at the last panel of the day. You know, I'm a dad. I have 3 kids all around 20 years old, and I'm always making dad jokes. You know, I'm known for my bad dad jokes. So I'm going to start with it's time to Gloc and roll, okay? We got to lock in here and finish the day strong, okay? Bad one? Okay. That's the best. If you groan, then you know it's a good dad joke. That's how you know it's a good dad joke. So say, I need to just. Okay, perfect. So thank you, Tanya. That was a great panel. Thank you to all the panelists. Really enjoyed the discussion and the interchange. And yeah, we can always do better, by the way, in how we organize these sessions. We're learning as we go. I love this venue. I love the interaction that we've been able to engineer here with this kind of in a boxing ring or a circle in the round. I think we may use this for some of our future events going forward because it's such a great way to interact. And I think it's a great point about trying to include young professionals, not only in designing the programming, but in the panels themselves. I know in other events that I've done, we look for using young people as moderators often, as well as panelists. And it really works well when you have young people asking the older generation the questions. Okay, so the next panel here is, can we do better? A generational pact for space and climate action. And the burning question here, what is the responsibility of the space community in prioritizing climate action, and how can we work across generations to implement real solutions? So I'm going to invite my panelists here on the stage, and let me start with Giulia Bordacchini. Yeah, Giulia, please come up. Giulia is the Space for Climate Action co-lead for SGAC. Welcome, Giulia. Next is Joe Landon. Joe Landon is the Chief Executive Officer of Crescent Space. Welcome, Joe. Next is Satesh Raj Periasamy. Satesh is a grant winner and a student at the University of Naples, Federico II. Yes. Yeah, not the first. Second. Okay, it's important. Next, we have Anna Raposo, Space Applications Engineer from ESA. Sabine van der Eck, a board member for Communications and Political Relations at OHB. Yeah. They're coming from every direction. I have to stay on my toes. And last but not least, Dominique Tillmans, the president of UBC. Thank you all for being here. This is formidable. Now I have 6 on 1, so maybe I can make this work. And by the way, the speaker bios are on the website. If I did the speaker bios, we'd probably have 10 minutes left at the end. So we're going to go straight to questions. Start with Giulia. I've asked all the panelists, by the way, to give me a couple of questions, and then we'll take your other questions from the audience here on the Slido app. So if you have questions, feel free to ask those. But we're going to go around with 1 question each, and then we'll go around again. Try to keep it moving, and if you have intervention for any of the responses, please just signal to me. So Giulia, young space professionals are carrying out dissemination activities for climate action in several areas. Which actions are the top priorities? Which actions can be implemented quickly? And which actions will have the most impact?
Thank you, Clay. I would say, as you may saw also today, we were expressing I would say we wanted to disseminate the result of our report through the SGAC one. So also the idea at the time was for sure to provide a position to the organization and and so on. But it was mostly to make clarity. So we wanted to understand which could be identified as a top priority in every single angle that we were identifying, obviously understanding that was waterfalling on several stakeholders. So I wouldn't make the discussion so general, I would say, but our top priority, in my opinion, is to clarify all the aspects that we are discussing today and during the past 2 days. So we are talking about decarbonization, but decarbonization of what? The manufacturing sector, the energy sector. We have so many vertical markets here on Earth that are converging and having the same problem. And obviously, space can be an enabler, and it's up on us to disseminate, I would say, first of all, the benefit, because we can see the benefit on the population, we can see the benefit on the young generation, we can see the benefit on, I would say, as it has been mentioned also in the previous panel, at a scholastic level, at a university level, at a research level. So, which are the priorities so far? Apart from make clear that we are talking about something that is concrete and it's impacting our ordinary life, we should make our life intentional. So as a young generation, I think, and this perhaps is the biggest contrast with the other generation, also the unborn one, because we're always talking about the comparison of existing generation, but we should also think about the fact that there are generations that are still not there. So obviously we should leave a word that is suitable for in all the aspects, and not only, I would say, about the most practical stuff that we can already monitor from space, but in every single more anthropogenic aspects, I would say. So, I would say that we have also very different representative of the different priorities that we could tackle so far. But I would say that the most important thing is the dialogue. So we should really pass the message that passion and dialogue are the main means to bring the situation forward. We should be intentional with our ordinary action. So we live an ordinary life, all of us, and I think that all of us, we wake up in the morning, we buy clothes, we decide the way we are reaching, a place or our school, our working place, and so on. So we should understand which are the most impactful actions so far, and while disseminating whatever the space sector can do for that.
Okay, very good. We always say, think globally, act locally, yeah?
Yes, exactly.
So you have to take a personal action on that. So Joe, you just started a company to do communications around the moon, like a lunar communications network? Wow, right? That's kind of amazing. Probably didn't think about that when you were 10 years ago, that you'd be doing that. So, why do we invest time and resources in exploring the moon? Really, what does it have to do with the topics and debate and discussion we have going on here?
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to this conversation because I think the space sector is really broad and has lots of topics, and climate is a very important one. But the topic that you teed up here for this is about priorities, and priorities implies choices, right, and different choices. So not everyone in the space industry can focus on climate, and nor should we. There are, the benefits of doing work anywhere in space. There are direct and indirect benefits to Earth for all of that. So even when we go and explore the moon, that has indirect and direct benefits on how we understand the Earth and how we can address climate change. And specifically looking at the moon, exploring places like the moon or Mars, it tells us about the Earth, and it helps us understand things that we didn't know about the Earth. Like, for example, how do we grow food on a space station or on Mars can help us to adapt plants and biology to a changing climate here on Earth, right? Things like that. Studying space also helps us better understand and better protect our world. So we know that the planet Venus in the solar system once might have been hospitable to life and now is completely uninhabitable and be due to the atmosphere and the runaway greenhouse effect that happened there. So that is again, we won't learn about we won't be able to fully appreciate Earth without going out into the solar system and doing this other work to understand what has happened elsewhere. And then climate change isn't the only threat we face. I think going out and exploring the solar system and the environment around the Earth helps us to identify other threats like near-Earth objects or asteroids that we might be able to prevent another type of disaster in the future as well.
Great. Satish.
Yes.
What motivated you towards environmental advocacy? How do you manifest that motivation within the space community to implement real change?
Right. Thanks for the question, Claire. I've been working with a few nonprofit organizations, and I've got like some training in journalism, and those sort of experiences have like got me to work more with environmental advocacy areas. But I think what really got me started was, I think I want to start with like, an experience that I had back in college. I'm not sure how many of you guys have had an encounter with monkeys, like, but I've had, and I would say this is a pretty interesting encounter.
Monkeys?
Monkeys, yes.
Okay, just everybody heard that, monkeys, right?
Yeah. So when I was back in college in Malaysia, I was heading back to my college dormitory after having bought my lunch, nasi lemak. It's a very delicious Malaysian dish. So out of nowhere, this monkey just jumped down from the other side of the fence, and it never let me pass. So I took a step back, it took a step forward, I took right, it went left, so there was no way of me running away from the monkey. And then there was no one else who I could also get help from, so I knew at that moment I had to let go of my nasi lemak, and I did. And the monkey eventually let me go. And I was glad that I survived that incident, and because monkeys can be really violent, and it also got me thinking. I mean, it was a pretty amusing scenario or incident, but after a while, I mean, that has been running in my mind, and it also got me thinking of the larger issues at play, and reflecting on how these monkeys once used to thrive in their natural habitats were forced to flee out of their natural habitats and be displaced because of unscrupulous land clearing and massive deforestation. And that was like the main issue, I guess, that got me thinking how it also highlighted the wildlife and human conflict that arises due to, I mean, in many areas due to rapid development, and how these rapid development projects are encroaching upon habitats of wildlife, and the sort of consequences of unsustainable forest management practices despite having environmental policies or laws in place. So that was one incident. And another one was the secrecy surrounding the Trans-Pacific Partnership negotiations way back then. So it also was alarming to find out that how corporations or multinational entities can just get away and just get away without any sort of like accountability or responsibility. And also I mean, especially when they've violated the environment. And this realization, and this also made me realize how certain entities or like certain, I mean, there exists this imbalance of power, and how governments can also be like sued, and these guys can get away from, I mean, after violating the environment. So that started, I mean, this sort of personal experiences got me started to address and like be part of the civil society communities, civil society movement. And reflecting that to the space community, I think we can, because like Sabah also mentioned about how there was a systemic issue that perpetuate environmental degradation and disregard for nature. So I think based on these experiences that some of us have, and like bringing that to the space community, we can definitely do better than other industries when it comes to transparency and accountability with regards to climate action. And similar to points or suggestions that have been brought up like throughout these past 2 days, I think we should also be advocating for a holistic and inclusive approach. And we have seen or heard in different sessions on how space industry can be contributing significantly by leveraging satellite data for maintaining and mitigating deforestation, supporting climate modeling. But to be real, we also got to acknowledge the shortcomings within our industry, which has also been brought up by the previous session. And I think by reflecting to what extent we are complicit or not within our industry, and then we can, or by enabling other parties in enabling further degradation. And I think by being real with ourselves and fostering more collaborations with grassroots movements and frontliners and other stakeholders would be the way forward.
All right, thank you. Don't mess with the monkey, I think is the lesson there. Dominique, humankind has always sought to progress, but for decades it's the Earth that we've been putting in danger here, yeah? Why can't politicians, you're a former politician yourself, why can't you make the right decisions? And why can't you do it quickly? What's holding it up?
Well, Clay, allow me to start with a little story.
Please.
We are, and I would like that you keep this story in your memory. We are in 2100s. We discover a powerful energy, and then we can travel anywhere in the universe. And there is a wealthy Mexican astronaut who wants to go to the Sombrero Galaxy. Of course, he's Mexican, he wants to go to the Sombrero Galaxy. And I go with him. So I explain to everybody. So the launch is perfect. He leaves Earth, he passes through the moon, through Mars, through Jupiter, Saturn, and then he's going. It's far, of course, it's far. Do you know that the Sombrero Galaxy, it's 6.58 light years away? Yeah, but at that time, it's not so far. So he goes. He goes out, he's going out of the solar system, and he continues in the Milky Way. The Milky Way is so huge, and he continues. Well, he feels a little bit lonely, but anyway, he continues. Everything is dark. Everything is black. Everything looks empty. And he continues to his goal. He goes to this. He leaves the Milky Way direction to the Galaxia Sombrero, and then finally he arrived to the Sombrero Galaxia, and then he stay a few years and discover many things. It was very interesting, but he feels lonely, and well, he wants to see humans, he wants to talk, he wants to go back to Earth. So he decides to go back to Earth. And he takes, of course, the same way. So he goes out of the Galaxia Sombrero, he continues, he arrives in the Milky Way, and the Milky Way is very long, and continues. Finally, he see our solar system, and he passes through Saturn, he passes through Jupiter, through Mars, and then very far away, you see our little blue dot with this tiny ozone layer. What is the conclusion of this story? What do you think about our story? I will tell you. We are just nothing. We are just nothing in the immensity of the universe. But we are very lucky. We are very lucky. We are living on a wonderful, generous blue planet, but we don't keep enough attention to this planet. We poison it. So, are we collectively irresponsible? Yes. But providentially, we are collectively ingenious. And I'm convinced that it's possible to have a great goal between scientists and politicians concerning the climate change.
Perfect. Beautiful.
And I can continue, huh? But I will start now. Yeah.
Beautiful. Anna, how can we improve the role of space in climate action and sustainability efforts for the wider economy and for society?
Right. I would actually like to make a point about how happy I was to see that in this conference we talked a lot about the communication gap and how space needs to look beyond its bubble. So that is where I would like to start my short narrative, because engaging with the actual end user and understanding the needs of the different sectors, more than the needs, the challenges and the problems that they face, it's where we could bring our value. And not because it's all doom and gloom, I would like to make a positive remark, if you allow me, on in ESA there's a program called Business Applications and Space Solutions that actually supports the development of applications that make use of space data and space technology to address real and key challenges on Earth. And this program actually engages with the end user in different sectors, in agriculture, in finance, in energy. So there is some discussion going on. I think we can do better as a whole, as a whole sector, and increase this communication, because it's also this communication, and that would allow us to identify the priorities and where we can put our actions. And another point I would like to make is about the data, because we also talked a lot about do we have enough data? Do we need more data? And I think the point here is going from data to information and to insights, because, and I heard this in a different panel, which is, I guess, is the unfortunate thing of being in a panel on the second day where many points are mentioned, but it's a good thing that it has been addressed, which is users don't really care about where data comes from. They want information, they want the insights that it provides. And the fact that space should become this commodity and inform the different sectors on what they can address, what they should put their energy in. One point that I would like to make about this data is that perhaps users don't have the capacity, or they're not interested in accessing the data itself. So this information, these insights, can actually be provided by another layer, so a service layer. And this is an opportunity that will connect, space with the end user, and that this middleman, if we want to call it, which will be a service provider, that we had a few in the conference talking about. And that's what the point I wanted to make is how can space address and help the different sectors is instead of bringing the data and saying, this is the data we have, is actually listening from society and the wider economy. What are your problems? Do we have a match with space? Because space might not be the solution, might be part of the solution together with other inputs. So that is the short information.
You make some excellent points. I used to run the Satellite Industry Association, and people think of satellites as something very exotic and far away, hundreds if not thousands or tens of thousands of miles away. And it's really just a very tall tower, for broadcasting ones and zeros, whether it's Earth observation, whether it's satellites measuring methane in the atmosphere, whether it's communications. It's really about applications, and it's really about delivering that kind of data in a usable fashion here.
Absolutely, and it's about also becoming a commodity. I think we also need to, if you personally, that we need to stop thinking of space as something special. Space. I see space as a means to an end, to be applied to something to solve an issue. Yeah.
Sabine.
I think space is something special.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It is special, but not in a bubble, not in a silo.
No, not in a bubble. So, of course, I can give you a lecture about what space industry can contribute via satellites, and I hope no one is really waiting for me here to tell you that Earth observation satellites are obviously keen instruments to fight climate change. If you're interested in, unfortunately, slides were not allowed, but I have 76 about very important Earth observation programs. But I think that space industry has also another role in fighting against climate change, because not only what our satellites or our instruments can provide, obviously in Earth observations, but our customers and our partners, they are also very sensitive when it comes to not only climate change, but also sustainability. And I think that, and this is also a little bit that space is not as special as we think when we think of where we're going, but how we work. And we are an industry with the same problems when it comes to recruiting and when it comes to, all the problems that we have when many people work together. And this is also why we are an industry that is growing problems and opportunities when it comes to our partners and customers. And it's our customers saying, at least us, what we should do and how we should do, and we learn from them. And in space, it's not only so. One part is, of course, we have mainly institutional and governmental customers, and from a German company, Germany and Europe. There it is for us, it's a total basis that, especially in Germany, people are really focusing, politicians, on climate change. So our customers are mostly
really, in Germany, for example, the Federal Ministry of Economics and Climate Action, it has it in his name, is leading the space activities. And therefore, it's obvious that we cannot, as an industry, provide solutions to our customers that are not really sensitive regarding climate change and sustainability. But also our cooperations with scientists, and not only scientists like, I don't know, at the University in Bremen, the Institute for Physik der Atmosphäre. They have been contributing so much for developing the SGAC instrument that went onto space station, not space station, NVSAT, but also if you work together with scientists like astrophysicists or astronomers, of course they have to deal with the facts of climate change, because if you cannot see through atmosphere because it's not possible anymore, then they cannot do their science. And this is why I think that we as a space industry, we learn from our partners and customers that are not the usual partners and customers for all the other industries, and therefore we can also contribute to our partners in the other industries to become more sensible for that. And last but not least, our colleagues, our engineers, I think on one hand is that they are in an average more younger than in many other industries. So yes, we are growing older too, but I think that space is still an attractive industry, so that we can really be a good employers for young people. And they are also struggling with climate change issues. And so I think that we as a space industry, we are very sensible for climate change and for fighting the climate change. Of course, we can do better. We can always do. But if we not only look on our instruments, but also how do we work, for whom and with whom do we work, I think that especially if we look into other industries, I hope that we are doing better than others, and that we can have a good basis to grow more into a better future.
Great, thank you. Yeah, no, look, we've talked, I think, at all the sessions the past couple of days, data access, data sharing, visualization of data, how do we communicate about the data, how do we make the data usable for the end user? So there's a lot of great discussion around here about actually how do we utilize this, all this ones and zeros that are coming from space, right? And make something concrete out of it that we can use. So, Julia, I'll come back to you, right? So you have all the hard questions. Well, you asked them yourself, so okay.
Practically.
All right. What are the next steps to allow the creation of an intergenerational policy act on climate change? That's a big question.
That's a big question, and I think that we are not even ready for that, honestly.
No.
So we are ready in terms of space sector, because I think that it's very much aware as a sector itself. But that's why before I was pointing out on clarity. So a forum like that are super important, because we don't have, I mean, it has been extensively discussed before, we don't have so much opportunity, let's say, to bring on the table what we really would like to speak out. Because sometimes it's also for a work affiliation, sometimes it's for political concerns, sometimes it's for several different factors. So I really think that we are in the moment that we should train each other. So it's easy for us as a young generation to point the finger to the other generation and say, oh yes, you did it wrong, you weren't able to conduct this kind of life, the lifestyle were not, I mean, we are not living the same geopolitical condition, we are not living the same asset availability, resource availability. There are so many conditions that are changing from one year to another right now that it's impossible to make a statement on that, in my opinion. But we should really learn on what is happening, like yesterday and today. I'm coming from Italy, and right now it's among the nations that it's hit by climate disasters. Can we call it like that for good? Floods. And I mean, soil, it's practically telling us, I can't anymore, I was exploited in many different layers. But at the same time, the other generation was really able to put space at the service of that, because we have several large and smaller companies in Europe and all over the world that are working for climate disaster and emergency response, and also in a very good way. So I was also reading on LinkedIn, for instance, many Italians were asking, oh, but we are investing in Copernicus. By the way, the amount is so very, very tiny with respect to the return. And why is not able to provide a response for an immediate response or an immediate data, an immediate information, and so on. There are not only technical barriers, but I think that it's also a matter of management barriers, because we have Copernicus allowed to establish a lot of platforms. One of that is for land use, the other one is for maritime use. There are several. So it's a matter. It's upon us to disseminate this kind of opportunity and let the other people understand, look, if you want, you can do from your personal laptop, because actually we did. So I think, back to the question, there are several challenges that we need to put on the table, but also try to find a common factor, more or less as we were doing with the report, because really, we really realized that the resolution at the end of the day, it's always the same. So to engage people that are able to provide a different answer. And in our case, it's also easier, because we are surrounded by fantastic brains. And in terms of intergenerational discussion, that would lead to how can we disruptively approach the situation. So there are so many ways that we can bring forward the situation in a classical way. So we can create another forum, we can create, I don't know, another multi-stakeholder coalition that is talking about the same stuff all the time, but not because it's impossible to find a solution, but because we don't have time this time. So perhaps, obviously, to recreate the opportunity of discussion with forum like that, and also to provide a bit of passion through stories like the one that Dominique was telling us before, it's mandatory, in my opinion. But I think that we should act very fast. We should go through documents and policy act and say, okay, young generation and other generation, that was supposed to be happening within 2030. It will never. So let's put that aside, and let's restrict and be realistic. So in this respect, perhaps I don't know, a young generation task force, so a very, I would say, heterogenic one. I think it could be something, honestly. And we're working on a volunteer
members of SGAC right now? How many members do you have?
25,000. Yeah, all over the world.
And they all have parents? They all have grandparents?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if my kids come to me and say, hey, Dad, you sign a pact right now that says you're going to take concrete steps on climate change, right? That you're going to do the following things. Maybe it's a place to start. I don't know.
That could be. I mean, as you see, it's an incredible forum, and we have Davide there.
Maybe reach a couple 100,000 people that way, yeah, and start a trend. I don't know.
But I would like to underline volunteer basis. Yeah. So all these people are not paid, and they are providing so many ideas, but also organizing concrete stuff, from startup competition to events to hackathon to so many different things that really, I'm doing more or less the same for my job. And I can tell you that at the end of the day, the result is there. Either on a business model approach or
I'm waiting for my check from IAF, I'm a volunteer as well. It's a joke, always with Christian. I say, really? It's a second job, yeah?
It's a second job.
It's a second job, yeah. So Joe, again, go back to the moon and Artemis a little bit. So, there's always a lot of jokes about Tang, Velcro, and what did space actually bring? When it's really like microprocessors and like technologies that help in healthcare and all kinds of industries downstream, right? So, are there things that we're looking at in the Artemis program in terms of technologies, things that are being developed that really are going to benefit life here on Earth and help us combat climate change?
Yeah, I think so. I thought about this before coming to this event, and I went and looked at the NASA science objectives for Artemis. And I think this actually, I want to tie this back to Anna's comments before about the communication gap, and also the great panel yesterday about communication, about how we're not clear communicating outside of our bubble, about how all of these efforts in space are connected, and they are connected. So if you look at those science goals for Artemis, spoiler alert, they're mostly about how do we help Earth, right? That's the reason we're going to the moon. So I pulled a couple of them. One of them is about understanding planetary processes that can affect climate. Like that is one of the goals of the Artemis program. And another is
Mars dry up, right?
Right, yeah. Revealing the record of the ancient sun and our astronomical environment. So it's really interesting how the lunar soil actually collects a historic record of the sun since the moon existed, and it's unperturbed. So you can go out there and like drill down or take some samples of the lunar soil, and you can use that data to make better predictions about space weather, more accurate climate models, and like predict what the sun did in the past, and use that to help predict how it's going to affect our climate in the future. So these are things that are driving the Artemis program. So I think that is important for us to make those connections and communicate to folks, within our own bubble even, how these are all connected. I think there's some other reasons why Artemis is important, and they're more personal. So the investment in people here on Earth. So one of the other questions I hear is like, why are we sending all this money into space? Like that's an invalid question. So nobody spends money in space. The tens of billions of dollars every year that are being spent on the Artemis program are being spent right here. Right? They're employing people, they're developing technologies, they're training people, they're developing, generating demand for STEM careers. So in my previous role, before starting Crescent, I led an organization, and part of that team was developing next generation climate satellites. So folks who are working on Artemis today could be working on a climate program tomorrow. Like that's part of the solution for climate. And then finally, and maybe most important, Artemis is inspiring a generation of humans here on Earth to tackle big challenges and to do big things. And again, that's a common theme that we heard here this week about climate. It's a big challenge. We have to rise to that challenge. And I think the Artemis program can prove to ourselves, to humanity, that we can tackle those challenges instead of hearing things like it's too hard or why bother trying. I think Artemis can really help us pull together.
Great stuff, yeah. We're definitely advancing the state of technology for sure. Satish, any technologies you see on the horizon? What can we do? What can space bring to the table here?
What can space bring to the table now? I think with regards to the main issue or concern with the next generation or the younger generation is always about how there's a lack of political will, huge lack of political will within politicians and policymakers in terms of like trying to tackle climate action. And I think, and also I'm studying biology of extreme environments and focusing on astrobiology, and like we astrobiologists, we are pretty much obsessed with extremophiles, life at extremes, and also analog missions. And I think this has made me a bit easier to establish the case
What was the last minute? Say that again. What kind of mission?
Analog missions.
Oh, analog missions,
yes.
Okay.
Thanks to the previous session, I think Sabah has also pretty much talked about analog missions, but I think as a space sector, in terms of like giving a push in the right direction for politicians or policymakers, we can probably leverage on the whole analog mission idea. So I'm not sure how wacky or extreme or exciting this idea could be, but analog missions for policymakers and politicians would be a good idea, I think so, to foster a deeper understanding and sense of urgency among politicians. Because, for analog missions, for those who are not familiar, it involves sending individuals, and this is a different one compared to what was mentioned in the previous session, because most of the analog missions here, for those of us who know, would be to send individuals to live and work in simulated environments that to a certain extent mimic the challenging conditions of space, or even other extreme locations on Earth, such as deserts, polar regions, or isolated habitats. And I think the idea here is to evoke that sort of transformative experience that would influence the decision-making process and actions at the end of the day. And I think analog missions have potential to expose these politicians and policymakers to the realities of living environments where resources are limited and life is harsh, and ultimately hope to give them this realization that how interconnected everything is. Because when it comes to environmental agenda or economic needs, it's always almost certain that the economic needs kind of supersede most of the time. So, and probably the lack of will there would probably be addressed by having this sort of analog missions where they can go and experience this. And the sort of first-hand experience would probably have a profound impact on their psyche, which was also mentioned previously on how the overview effect would make them sort of bring this appreciation towards Earth, towards our pale blue dot. And I think if the politicians don't have the will or are lacking, this maybe could be one direction to push them forward.
Okay. Yeah. Dominique, young people often feel they're not being listened to. Yeah?
Yeah.
Not surprising, I guess, huh? We don't listen to the youth, right? We don't listen to the youth. I don't know why, but we don't. what can we do? What do you think we can do about that? How do we make their voices heard by the politicians, by the governments? You were in this position for years, yeah?
Yeah, I think you must understand what's happened with the politicians, and I try to explain. So I think the good question is why there is no politicians at this so important and relevant event dedicated to them. And I know that Christian takes so much time to try to invite them. I will try to answer the question. So about space, about politicians and climate. Well, you can be sure that the politicians become aware about climate change with around 12 billion euro damage per year in Europe. So they begin aware. But they are not interested by space. Most of them are not interested by space. Why? For me, 4 reasons. 4 reasons. The first one is the life of a politician is really hectic. We are working a lot very late in the evening. We are working also the weekend because we have to meet our electors. So we are ringing all the time, and we solve solutions after solutions, and we have no time to be prospective. That's the big danger of politicians. We have not the time to be prospective. Second, space is too technical, too complicated. Space is not understandable for politicians. So they said, it's not for me, it's for engineers and technicians, not for me. Third, politicians are all the time under pressure. Pressure from the lobbies. And the biggest one is the economic lobbies. And just this afternoon, I was looking on my phone that my prime minister in Belgium and Macron, the president of France, they demand a push on the button on the climate, on the EU climate legislation. They said it's too much. Please don't ask more. Don't ask restoring biodiversity. Don't ask us to reduce ozone. We have enough with the CO2 emission targets. So they are really on the pressure of the on the economic sectors, on association, on all stakeholders, about opposition in the parliament. So they are under pressure all the time. And so they take the decision they take. Most of the decisions are compromised. And with the compromise, you have the impression that the decision-making process remains unfactory. So what to do? How to react? The first thing, make space understandable, please. Make space understandable. When you have a contact with the politicians, well, be short, be concise. They have no time. But the most important things, make politics, please. We need scientists who make politics. That is very important. And from our part, from IAF, we are working very hard to convince politicians about space, about the benefits of space. We redesigned the MMOP meeting, so the Minister and Member of Parliament meeting. And so we asked the ministers to explain shortly the space strategy of their country, and to the parliamentarians to explain relevant space solutions in the regions. It means that we are exchanges, good practices, information, and this is very important. We speak the same languages, We understand. We are not afraid to ask a question. When you have a politician in such an assembly, he will never ask a question because he feels it's not his domain. It will be ridiculous. So we are together, and our goal is to make space understandable, accessible, and without any techniques. And our motto, our motto is very important. It's what is possible in your country might be possible in mine too. So we invite the politicians all over the world to come and just to listen, because you have countries who are not aware about space. So please, politicians, the parliamentarians, come here, and maybe you will find solution for your country that you ignore. So we want to make with this MMOP meeting the place to be for all politicians in the world.
Okay, thank you.
Talks.
We only got 5 minutes left, so I beg my pardon. I'm going to go to a couple of the questions from Slido. You guys have the first opportunity. All right? So you're on the hot seat now. Okay. So question about decarbonizing. You know, we've talked about decarbonizing in a lot of the sessions. How do we decarbonize? How do we decarbonize the space sector? Any thoughts on that? Is there any opinion on how do we do that? Look, rockets, I come from the rocket side of the business where it's hydrocarbons, right? You're burning RP1 or methane going up for the rocket, but other ways we could help to decarbonize our space sector in terms of how we build, how we launch, how we do operations.
Of course, we are trying to, since we are a stock listed company, we have to focus on our ESG criteria, and therefore we are always looking for decarbonization and trying to find solutions that we are not heating have too much heating for the clean rooms and stuff like this. But this is also again all the things that we have to do as a company in a normal industry. I think that especially launches are a little bit a critical step towards decarbonization. But I think that space industry is always working on a very high level on inventing new technologies, and therefore I'm pretty sure we will find a way out of that problem too, hopefully. Keeping my fingers crossed.
Yeah, the good news is I think some rockets are powered by liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen, which you can actually produce through green energy, yes, if you have wind and solar. And then the product is water. Huh? In fact, they're quite clean, but it's not all rockets, yeah, for sure. Yeah. Do you have a thought, Anna? No?
Just a small note, because if we think about launching satellites and then what happens to them, at the end of life, we can also think, on our impact on the overall orbital environmental, if we want to go through that route. So thinking about our options in terms of end of life and how it affects our design of spacecraft. I'm not a specialist, but this is also something we can look at.
Sure, when we talk about sustainability in space too, being able to bring those satellites down and,
absolutely.
And keep a cleaner commons for operations.
Yeah.
I have an O'Neillian question here. You guys know who Gerard O'Neill is? Are you guys familiar with him? I worked for Jeff Bezos, and he's a big O'Neill fan. Yeah, so he was basically positing that we're planetary chauvinists in a way. We shouldn't think necessarily about going to Mars and Venus and all these other planets. That we might actually create an economy, right, in orbits with artificial space stations. But also the idea that you have unlimited resources in space, right? You can go and you can harvest minerals from asteroids that you can actually use 24/7 solar power in space. What do you guys think about that future? Is it too far away? Is it something for the next generation to consider? Should we be striving for that? What do you think? Anyone?
Because you're looking at me, and
I'm looking at the next generation.
But there's a topic that it's really close to my heart, and it's to find a business model for in-orbit servicing. So if we're talking about sustainability, it's okay to monitor, and there are already, like privateers, there are several companies already looking at the situation and how crowded is low Earth orbit. So that implies also, obviously, the future be launched private space station and so on and so forth. But if we are talking about circular economy or degrowth economy here on Earth, we should apply that also in space. So a spacecraft that adjusts, maintain, or surveil, I don't know, depending on the need. Another spacecraft, it's something that should be really carried out forward. But the main problem for what I saw at least 2-3 years ago was that there's no business model. So if there's no economic viability, apart from technical feasibility, in this case we're stuck.
Yeah.
So,
any other thoughts? We need to live and work in space, right?
I think I think there's benefit to developing new economies and new business models, right? I mean, I think it's worth trying because just by increasing economic activity on Earth and in space is going to have positive benefits. And I think not all those technologies might help with the climate crisis, but some of them might. So let's try.
Okay. Okay. Are we ready to sacrifice convenience to save our planet from global warming when convenience is everything humanity keeps making as a priority, huh? We prioritize convenience in our lives and what we do. Are we ready to sacrifice? By the way, has anybody noticed here when you got to Norway that almost all of the cars are electric?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I was asking the minister yesterday, and he said, yeah, like 9 out of 10 cars now are electric that they're buying here in Norway. And they had some incentives, but the incentives are now gone away, and they're still buying electric vehicles here. And I've seen the future, and it's a very quiet future when you're outside. Yeah. It's very quiet. There's not a lot of cars. But the electric car is fairly convenient now. I mean, we get a better battery range. They're very efficient. We have some autonomous driving features. It doesn't seem like it's too bad to prioritize electric vehicle over a gas-burning vehicle. What do you think? Are we ready to sacrifice? Dominique, are you ready to give up your car for an electric vehicle?
I have already a car with a gas. It's a mixed gas and
hybrid.
Yeah, it's an hybrid one. But I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
Why not to launch a work group with the Space Generation Advisory Council and IAF to launch a work plan, a strong work plan. I think today there are so many voices speaking about space, and it's a message. It's a little bit confusing, huh? Mm-hmm. And so maybe to have a strong message from the future workforce and the experienced people, it can be a strong message from outside, and I think we need that. Excellent.
Well, I see we're 43 seconds over time. I want to thank you guys all. I think we're now getting ready for the evening events, so thank you guys all for joining. Thank you for the discussion. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks, Kay, and thanks to all the speakers. May I ask you also for a group picture on that side? But we would not like to close this afternoon without having a conclusion done by our IAF Vice President, Davide PETRILLO. Davide, please summarize and conclude this session, please.
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to be straight to the point. I see that, I'm going to do it really, really quickly, and that's also my way of being, trying to provide a conclusion and a summary of this session that has been really dynamic, lots of thoughts, and honestly something that I learned as well from my previous experience, when I was leading SGAC. I would say that from my personal perspective, the real summary that I noticed here is really the following. And I'm going to play the same game as Tanya did before. So who considers people as junior at the moment? So junior. There you go. Perfect. So with the junior people, this is my advice. And this is something that I heard as well from you all while doing the 2 panels. From my point of view, really, don't be shy. Like, try to do the best as possible to raise your voice and making sure that you really believe in what you're believing, being respectful at the same time, but at the same time showing that our voice matters. I consider as well myself as junior. So our voice matters, and we need to be listened to the senior people. So to the other senior people, this is also the other advice that I would like to share, like make room and make sure that you can listen to the young people, because that's really something that is important, because the decision that you're taking today, at the end, are going to be faced by us in the future. So that's the summary. I believe it came out from these two panels, this session. I want to say thank you to the IAF and to SGAC to make this happen, because this has been really a wonderful environment that I would love to see as well in future editions. And talking about future editions, there will be future editions in which we will involve the next generation at the next IAC 2023 in Baku. So there will be lots of opportunities over there for the next generation, and not only, also dynamics and environments like this one. So please don't forget to join us in Baku in Azerbaijan in 2023. Registration is open. Thank you so much. I don't know, Christian, if you have any closing logistics remarks.
Yeah, before coming to the logistics remarks, a big thanks to you, and a round of applause again for Davide.
Thank you.
The work Davide has been doing within SGAC, but also within the IAF, is just remarkable. So thank you very much for this. This brings us to the end of the second day of Gloc, and it just remains to remind you that you should all not miss the welcome reception or the evening reception this evening in the beautiful town hall. Please be there not later than 7, so it's a bit pressed, but it's not far from here. And other than that, we would look forward to seeing you tomorrow morning again at 9 o'clock to kick off the third day. Thank you.